If you guys have been waiting for an opportunity to get your hands dirty with Arturia's DX7, or any DX7 for that matter, I have the perfect straightforward sound to show you how to make. It's that classic R&B, Neo Soul, Tynes type sound. Let's take a look at how to make it. All right, so this is the famous DX7 that's been replicated by Arturia. And I'm just gonna go to the top left and press new preset so we can get a fresh start on the whole thing. On the very left side here, you can see that there are a total of 6 operators for us to choose from to use as carriers or modulators. Now, the place to start when you are first making a sound is right in this bottom middle section, and this is where the algorithms are found. So there are a total of 32 of these different configurations to choose from, and you can kind of think of these as presets for how the different operators are connected together and their relationships. And each of these configurations helps you get a different type of sound. And today we're going to start with number 5. Why do we want algorithm 5, you ask? Well, people have been experimenting with these different algorithms and configurations for a very long time, many years. And number 5 is well known for helping to create a flexible sort of keys sound. And that's what we're after. So let's get some sound going. Today I have some chords that I laid down from the song Missing You by Mary J. Blige. This is one of my all-time favorites. And it uses this very sound that we're going to base ours off of. So this is what it sounds like just with sine wave. So you can see from our chosen algorithm that operators 1, 3, and 5 are our carriers, and operators 2, 4, and 6 are our modulators. You're about to see the power of the humble sine wave because that's literally all that we're using in this entire synth patch. So let's work on the envelope for operator 1 so it's not just a boring sine wave here. You can see that you have this little drop-down list at the top, and by default you get some kind of strange envelope choices on the DX7. What I'm going to do for our synth today is use the classic DX7 envelope. Just select a DX7 there from that drop down. And it uses what are called rates and levels for each point in the graph, which is actually really straightforward once you get your hands dirty with it a little bit. And besides, you and I want the real deal. We want the authentic DX7 experience. Now, if you're anything like me, you might be used to using millisecond values to adjust your envelopes, but here we're actually just using what's called the rate and the level. The only thing that you have to remember is that 99 is the absolute fastest it can move between one point and another. So if we just slow it down, we slow the attack down, we lower the number for the rate, okay? All I'm doing here is to adjust the size of the graph, or the scale of the graph rather, is I'm just clicking and dragging and moving that up, okay? So this next point, point number 2, you could think of as the hold, right? So the amount of time it takes to get from the attack to the hold, and then we'll get from the hold to the sustain right after that. So I'm gonna move this rate for the attack back a little bit slower than the absolute fastest to get rid of that edge, you know, every time I press. Now, what we're looking for in this key sound is sort of a medium, slow, gradual decay out to nothing, and then when we take our finger off of the key, we want it to cut off almost instantly, but you know, in still a natural way. I'm going to slow this rate down for the hold, way down. We're also going to bring the level down here. So here's what it sounds like now. It takes quite a long time to get to that stage, and that's what we like, okay? For the sustain, I'm gonna bring it all the way down to 0, but I still want to control the amount of time it's gonna take, so I'm gonna slow that down as well. And then for the release time, let's just bring that down somewhere around there. So just head back up to the top left where it says Overview, and I'm just gonna select operator 2. Now remember, this is our modulating signal for our carrier number 1. If I just drag this knob up as is, it's now modulating the frequency of our first carrier, but we don't want it to sound that terrible. So the idea behind the very first part of the sound is that we're gonna make that little twinkly sound, sort of the attacking sound. And so we want it to be super bright, and the best way for us to get a really bright sound with FM synths is to increase the ratio from 1:1 to say 32:1. And check out what this sounds like now. Okay, it's a little harsh sounding, but what we're going to do is adjust the envelope so that it decays, sort of like the initial attack on, say, like a glockenspiel would. So if we just head to the drop down, we change to DX7 one more time. We can slow the attack down here a little bit. For the hold, we'll slow that down as well. Bring it somewhere around here, say. Now for the sustain, let's bring it down to 0 again because we want it to decay all the way. And we'll do something like this. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is just the rate on the release. All right, so now we're going to head back to overview. You guys know the drill by now, but actually what I'm going to do is mute these other operators, operators 1 and 2, so that we can hear exactly what's happening with each part of our sound, and you'll see how it all comes together at the end, okay? So I'm going to turn up operator 3 here so we can hear it again. We make sure operator 3 is selected, and we head to envelopes and select DX7 one more time. Slow down the attack. This one will take a little bit longer to decay and it'll be a little louder. Okay, and then the sustain we'll bring to 0 and we'll make it a nice slow decay somewhere right there. We can't forget about the release, and we'll just make that somewhere around 50. Now the difference here with operator 4 is that now we're actually just going to do our 1-to-1 ratio for our frequency modulation. So just like in the example I showed you with operator 1. Now the only difference with operator 4 here is that I'm going to give it its own unique envelope as well. All right, so we'll slow the attack down. I keep this level pretty high. It'll be slower, but it'll have a little bit more of the noticeable sound in it. Okay, and then we'll bring the sustain all the way down to 0. Make this a little bit longer, and then make our rate for the release to be 50, so it's consistent. Now, to make things easy, I'm just going to copy over the envelope from operator 4 and add that to 5 and 6. And all you have to do is click on this little icon with the doubled windows looking thing and move it to what looks like the download icon. And then we're going to do it, of course, again with operator 6. Now, you also notice in the algorithm down here that there's something a little bit different happening with our modulator signal on 6. Instead of just modulating our carrier signal 5, it's feeding back the signal that it is using to modulate operator 5 back to itself to add more harmonics and more of an interesting sound, which is one of the reasons that we chose this algorithm, which creates a little bit more interest here. And again, I'm just kind of adjusting these levels to taste. It's nothing too specific at the moment. So now if we put it all together and we right click and we activate each one of these operators, we can hear the whole shebang. Oh, and you know this is going to sound lush when we start adding in that chorus, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm just getting excited. Now, one other detail that really takes us to the next level, I think, in terms of how natural it sounds is I just went back to the envelope on operator 1, and I'm going to increase the keyboard scaling. It goes up to 7. I'm going to increase it to 3. And then if we do the same thing on every other operator, so we turn this to 3. All it's really doing is that when you're playing a higher key, it adjusts the envelopes to be faster, and if you're playing a lower key, then it will have them be slower, which makes it sound a lot more natural. So watch what happens with the envelopes when I play the highest possible key. Now the lowest key, it's like they all just turn into snails or something. And speaking of details, one other thing I like to do with the tuning is I like to detune a few of these operators to create that beating sound. So if we increase the detuning here to 4, and then, I don't know, on operator 5, let's go down 7. And then the modulator signal, we will do 7. I just love that imperfection it adds. When you're making beats, it's really nice to have macro controls ready to go. And that is, controls that control important parameters in your synth. So what we could do is head up to the mods tab here, and we could assign some stuff to our macros right here, stuff that might end up mattering. So for example, an easy one to do would be, let's call macro 1 brightness. Okay, if we wanted the synth to be a little bit less bright, what we need to do is assign operator 2, which is our twinkly part of the synth, the level of that to macro 1, which is our brightness, okay? So the way that we do that is in this little matrix here. You can see that some stuff is already added, and I'm going to double click that and just get rid of it so we can have a clean slate. Now, what we're interested in doing is controlling operator 2 level. And then we want that to correspond with macro 1. Now, macros are found at the bottom right of the source selection menu here, and I'm going to choose macro 1. So now we can assign this little slider to be controlled by macro 1. And so you'll hear that this will be much darker now, unless we turn it all the way up. now it's back where it was. Another idea I had for this synth is, let's say we wanted to make it more twinkly, but we didn't want to just increase the sound of the twinkliness. What we could do is assign a macro to control operators 3, 4, 5, and 6, because remember, that's sort of the body of our sound. And so what I'm going to do is head over to the right tab, and I'm going to assign operator 3 level, 4 level, 5 level, 6 level. And we want that to be assigned to macro 2, so I'm going to select macro 2, and now that's available to be assigned in our matrix here. We'll call this mids. Now if I drag up on each one of these, and now we can kind of sculpt the sound a little bit better. But I'm just going to leave that at 100% for right now. With sort of a throwback sound like this, it might be nice to have something that controls the tuning, like an LFO. Since we have tuning already assigned here in this matrix, and LFO2 is available for us to use, let's see what happens when we drag this tuning to be controlled by LFO2, which is right here. Okay, we get a little weird with it. Okay, obviously we don't want it to be that dizzying. We want to be able to control how dizzying it really sounds. If I call macro 3 cassette, we can assign LFO2 amplitude, which is essentially the depth of the LFO's effect on the tuning, to be controlled by macro 3. So let's assign macro 3 over here and line it up with LFO2 amp. So now it's time for the effects, and luckily for us, there's an effects tab right here at the top. So we click that, it switches over, and for a sound like this, I like to throw a little compression into the mix. I'm going to use some EQ here because it's a little bit bottom heavy for me. Add sort of a high pass, and maybe I'm thinking a low shelf just to kind of control some of those really low frequencies. Now there is kind of a cool analog chorus sound in here. Whew. But I actually prefer to use the Juno 6 chorus. I just really like the way it sounds, and I like the interface, and I just love it. Man, this just makes me feel like I'm in some sort of romantic 90s sitcom scene. Anyway, like I said, the DX7 is a little quirky. It's a little quirky, but you can get some incredible sounds out of it, I promise you. Just takes a little bit of patience. If you guys do have any questions about it, please ask us down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Play around with those algorithms and just have some fun. We'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.